had a great opportunity to speak with the Senate Majority Leader last week, and this week we are proud to welcome into our studios the Speaker of the House of the General Assembly in the state of Tennessee. Cameron Sexton joins us. Hey, Cameron.
Hey, how you doing, Matt?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Did you have a nice time off?
It was good. Crossville, and enjoyed it. Played some golf the week of Christmas, which is rare for Crossville, so it was a good break.
I'm mildly disappointed you didn't invite me, but maybe next time. That's good. That's all good.
Be happy to.
I'll even pay if I'm allowed to do
well,
that.
I played so well that day, I said, you know what, I'm not going to play the rest of the year because I want to end the year on a high note.
Broke 100, did you? Broke 100. That's good. Just start the interview off on the right note. Tomorrow, big day. I mean, look, it is obviously the elephant in the room that the General Assembly did not end as most of us would have wanted. And the special session really didn't go as many of us would have wanted for different reasons on the two fronts. Right. Let's start with the General Assembly. Obviously, there are certain members in the minority party that chose to show out in the latter portion of the General Assembly. You tried to keep order as best you could. You tried to maintain order during the special session. Talk to me about entering this General Assembly and what we can do to make sure that those types of breaches of decorum don't happen again.
Yeah, so we're continuing to look at the rules. There's a rule meeting going on right now where there are Republicans that are proposing rules and Democrats are proposing rules. So we hope to have a rules package by about an hour or so that will be on the floor tomorrow to vote for. That takes some a special session, not all of it, that things that worked, things that didn't work, and incorporate it into the General Assembly. I think we found a good middle ground. But look, at the end of the day, whether you're in a courtroom or it's your business or anywhere, you have to have decorum. You can't have chaos. And so we're gonna strive to make sure that we can keep decorum, and then continue to move forward and do the people's business.
Does it frustrate you at all? And maybe you're insulated from this, maybe intentionally or unintentionally. Does it frustrate you at all? Because I look at it, I was sitting in the gallery. And I mean, it's obvious you have to have the rules of the body as voted by the body. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, everything devolves into chaos like we saw. But that's not the way the mainstream media seems to want to report this issue. Does it frustrate you at all how they're characterizing what happened during the general and what happened during the special?
Some of them, yes, some of them, no. Like, I get the game. I get what they're trying to promote. I get what they're trying to do. They don't like Tennessee leading the country, being a conservative state and doing the things that we do and being successful because it's a bad example for other states that they're trying to turn to blue. And so Tennessee's a red state that everybody's looking at. And so when we're performing as well and doing as things as great as we are, they're going to try to minimize us. They want us to actually lose seats. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is upholding the tradition of the General Assembly that's always been in place under Democrat or Republican rule. We've never had issues like this in our history up until last year, 2 years ago. And so we're going to continue to look at the rules and have decorum. The first thing is to have decorum so we can do the people's business. If you don't have decorum, you can't do it.
I was critical of you, and it's only fair that we talk about this face to face. I mean, well, it comes with the territory, right? I mean, I was a little bit critical of not what rules you put in place, but not anticipating the reaction. Is that unfair? I mean, because it seemed like the sign rule, the 8x11 little sign rule that you guys have allowed in the House up until this last session.
Well, never in the balconies, but yes.
I mean, but you allowed them at chest level, right?
Not in the balcony. There's a sign that's been going up into the balconies for years that said no signs allowed. That has been going into the balconies for years.
And was it just an enforcement of that rule that led to what happened?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, what you had is you had people throwing banners out and bigger signs. And so at some point, you've got to try to hold the line at some point. And so before we went in the special session, I directed the clerks to call other states and say, what's your policies? What's your rules? Like maybe they have something. Maybe they've gone through something that we need to look at. We also called Congress and asked Congress, what's your policies? They have a no sign in their balconies in Congress. So whenever we were thinking about it, we didn't think that if it's good enough for Congress to be in the balconies, what's going to be the issue here?
Isn't there there's a lawsuit going on right now about rules, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is, but, that's the way it is. In today's world, you get sued for doing anything. So, look, but what we try to do is look what other states and what Congress have done, and we didn't do anything different than what had been done in other states or anything like that. So,
beyond that, what do you consider, once we get, let me say one more thing about the rules package, or get you to say one more thing. The rules are decided by whom?
The body votes on the rules.
So there has been, by some members in the Democrat Party, this suggestion that you are acting like a dictator, that you're acting like an authoritarian. I think they're trying to reflect on some national politics and place that on you. How would you respond to that?
Well, I mean, look, that's the narrative they want to say. But what I'll say is we're having a rules committee right now where anybody can propose rules. There's Democrats and Republicans who are proposing rules. Those, whatever goes into the rules package will go to the body and we'll vote on it. And those votes, if they're over 50, will become part of the body. And so the rules are voted on. They're voted on by you vote on whether you vote for them or against them. If they are adopted, you have to abide by it. It's like a state law, right? If you get 50 votes, it becomes law. Just because you voted against it doesn't mean that you don't have to follow state law. And so that's the process.
All right. So, and the last question on this front before we move forward to the general session, how do you handle it when they try to break the rules? I mean, what can you do differently, or will you do anything differently than you've done in the past in terms of enforcement?
Well, I'm not going to do anything different than in the past. I've given warnings. We rule people out of order. There's all kinds of things. And so we still have things at our disposal. What we're trying to do is back during regular session, the two options that we really had was censorship and expulsion, and there was nothing in between. And so when people start realizing what the options were, it changes the whole conversation about what actions we took, because it wasn't to the level of censorship, it was to the level of expulsion if there's nothing in between. So, we're trying to give our ability to have different options, more options, because when you don't go through this in your history of a state as the General Assembly, you've never had to go through this before as far as the disruptions on the House floor and what was happening to keep decorum, then you've got to update your rules to coincide with those new actions.
So it would not be out of the realm of possibility that we would have a third option beyond censure and not to the level of expulsion.
That's right. I mean, other states have done remote voting, removal from the House floor, kind of like what they did. I think it was in Montana or Wyoming. So there's other things that our option that we can do. We didn't have those options before.
Cameron Sexton, our guest, he is Speaker of the House. The session starts tomorrow. Gavel's in at noon. Is that right? Or thereabouts? High noon. What's the biggest thing? What's the biggest issue that you feel like you're going to tackle this session?
Well, I mean, look, the governor's school choice is going to be a big issue. I think you listening to what's happening in Memphis and some other areas of our state, obviously crime and juvenile crime is a big issue. I think if you looked at special session, there's a lot of bills dealing with mental health. If you're declared incompetent or involuntary commitment, the issue. And so I think we're working together on that. So I think there's a lot of issues to work on. The budget, obviously, we're going to continue to look at that. I think you'll see another tax cut. The governor's proposed another tax cut for F&E taxes, I hope. And so it'll be a good session. We'll continue to push Tennessee forward and continue to do things that's made us great over the last 13 years.
What, if anything, I mean, I guess because you mention it, that the plan is that or the expectation is the House will take up some of the issues surrounding crime in our major cities. Mm-hmm. Primarily Memphis. I mean, Nashville's seen its share. Every big city is going to see a little more crime than the smaller communities. That's normal. It's expected. But Memphis is abnormal. The amount of crime versus the amount of population. And it seems to be exacerbated by the fact that the district attorney is taking what most of us would perceive, us laymen would perceive as a soft on crime approach. What, if anything, what role does the Tennessee House of Representatives and the General Assembly have in that regard?
Well, our role is to keep people feeling safe and the community feel safe. And if you have a DA who's changing the bail requirements, who's not holding people the way they should, who's changing the policies, not holding people accountable for certain crimes, there's ways that we can step in. The problem we have in Tennessee law is they have the ability to use discretion is the key word. And so that gives you a lot of leeway sometimes. And so we're kind of looking at that, trying to work with other DAs. But when you're almost at 400 homicides in Memphis in 1 year, 397, and that was, I think, at least over 50 more than they had the previous year, and you had the carjackings and the juvenile crime, something is going on in Memphis that we have to handle. We're going to work with Senator Taylor, and Senator Johnson was down there talking to him. So we're going to work with them and pass a crime package that will continue to do that and hold that DA accountable as we go forward.
Our own DA, Glenn Funk, took a lot of heat, rightly so in my estimation, in the aftermath of the Belmont University student, 18-year-old, who was killed accidentally, and I put that in air quotes, shot by an individual that had just gotten out of the system due to what Funk described as a flaw in the system, what I would describe as not pressing these matters to keep these people behind bars. How would you characterize what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, when I've talked to other DAs, there's an issue if someone's declared incompetent. There's been other people declared incompetent post that, where the DA said there's nothing we can do. One was we have a stalking law in our state that's not hard enough, that's not tough enough, and so There was an individual who was stalking a family, showed up at their house numerous times, on their property numerous times. They feared for their safety. They were under mental evaluation for severe stalking. And when they were declared incompetent, they got out. That family's terrified of what's going to happen. That was in another part of the state. And so there is an issue there. To what level it rises between DA and someone else, we can sit here and debate that. But that is an issue for someone being declared incompetent that we have to fix.
The issue of mental illness was, I guess I would say it this way. There was a disagreement between the House and the Senate during the special session, and it's not unique to Tennessee. Right. These things happen. The Senate wanted only to deal with those specific matters that the governor proposed. The House took it as an opportunity, and that impasse eventually led to gaveling out of the special. Do you believe you could have done more on the mental illness front then, and do you expect to circle back to that during the General Assembly? Because I feel like we have an extreme mental illness issue that is being exacerbated by pharmaceuticals. That is my opinion, and I don't know what, if anything, the General Assembly can do about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously I'm going to say I think we could have done more because the House passed more legislation. It wasn't a disagreement with policy. So the disagreement with the House and Senate wasn't about policy or about the bills we passed. It was about the Senate, as you rightly said, they just want to do what the governor called and do what he did and then come back and focus on January. So that's where we are now. So we're going to work with them in January to work on that legislation, hopefully get some things passed. I think if you want to look at what's been going on, we also, to your point about prescriptions, we over-medicate ADHD. There's so many kids on those medications. We're not giving them the benefit of really trying to understand. There's some behavioral analytics and other things that people are trying to do that help without medication control. And so I think we do have to try to get back to giving people the ability to get counseling or behavioral therapy or whatever that may be to handle those situations outside of medicine. Don't be medicine first.
What if anything, can you do regarding specifically addressing covenant? I find it, and I asked Jack this question last week, I find it difficult to understand how far you can go on that specific front without additional information. And sadly, that's tied up in court. And I understand that that's a matter that is beyond your control. But how much can you advance specific legislation that potentially could flag a covenant type situation without that information?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's some generalities that you hear out there. So one is that individual was under doctor's care, under mental health care. We don't know what those conversations were, so we don't know if they rise to the level where they should have been reported in involuntary commitment. But we do know that she was probably having those conversations. And so why was there not a recommendation for involuntary commitment, which would have potentially given her the ability to have services, been able to give law enforcement tools to go in to take away guns, see if they have guns? It would have changed the whole dynamic to a certain degree. So that was one issue that we do know that we'd like to have more information on. I think the other thing is people are talking about, we don't know when she bought the gun, so we don't know how long she was under doctor's care. We don't know when that'd be a second thing that we'd like to know. The third thing is we also know in our background check system, it's not instantaneous. We all assume for a lot of time that if you're adjudicated in court or if you had a felony, that information would flow into the database immediately. What we found out is every county has a different database, a different type of system. And so a lot of times people are still faxing in stuff. And so we have over 250,000 records that are in the database. And so before you start going down the road that the Democrats want to do, which we're not going to do, which is gun registration and red flag laws and all that, we need to take a look and work on the database and make it instantaneous. If we do that, then the people who cannot buy guns can't go buy guns because they're going to be in the database and they're going to be dinged and they can't purchase.
It seems to me that the system as it exists now, works in as much as the human beings do the things necessary and that we shore up some of the things that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, what the Democrats want you to do is to impose penalties on 99% of the population who are doing it correctly,
right?
At the expense of 1%. School shootings are terrible. They shouldn't happen. We can do things, SROs, other things that help to limit that. But if you're going to have an individual who wants to hurt somebody, they're going to do it. It's hard to stop that individual. That's just what they're wanting to do. Can we try to make it harder? Can we try to pick it up sooner? Can we do all that? Yes, we can, and we can do a better job of that.
Real quick, speaking more on SROs, can we do that right after the break? All right, so we've got to take a quick time out. I also would love it if you have any questions for the speaker, get those in on the super text line, and I will look at these things, and I will feed them to the speaker, and he will answer said questions. 99.7 WTN. We got the speaker for another good segment, and we are appreciative of his appearance today in studio on the Matt Murphy Show the day before the General Assembly begins. We like to cover state politics as much as national politics because I believe that which is most local to you affects you far more than some of the national stuff. Frankly, I think we have it reversed a lot of times, the way that we talk about these issues. That said, Speaker of the House Cameron Sexton is with us to discuss the coming General Assembly. We talked a lot about rules and regs and how things finished up. We got into some of the issues that we expect to get into. Let me get to the matter of education before I go to some of these questions on the super text line. Education choice. Already it's being completely mischaracterized, as we might expect, by our friends on the political left.
As always.
You're trying to destroy public education. You don't care about the children. You don't care about the teachers. For me, it's a matter of the more opportunity a parent has to make good, solid decisions without regard for their bank account, for their kids, the better. I mean, it's as simple as that. Explain to me what you hope comes out of this session and how you respond to some of the criticism.
Look, at the end of the day, it's the taxpayers' money, right? It's your money, Matt. And so if you're sending your kids to school and the school doesn't have the academic standards that you think your child should need or they're not performing as well, or if there's other issues going on, you should have the capability to move your kid to where you think that they can get the best education. So it's your money, first of all. Democrats want to tell you it's the state's money. You shouldn't use your money. You should use your money. So it's your money to make that decision that's best for your child. The second thing is that empowers the parents. And so that gives them the capability of holding those schools accountable for a lot of decisions being made or academic or whatever. And so that is part of the choice. When you look at the Democrats' argument, this is what's fascinating about Democrats, is they tell you, well, it's okay if you're wealthy, you can pull your kid out of public or private school, but if you don't have the means and you're low income, you got to stay in that school system that's not the best fit for your child. And so they actually are against who they say they represent, to be honest with you. And so why are we afraid to allow parents to make the choice that's the best for their child? That's what we should be about. And so the bill is going to move us in that direction of choice. Other states have been successful. Florida spends the same amount of money per pupil as we do, and they're first in educational attainment in America. We're 34th. And so let's give parents more choice. What are we scared of? Are we really scared of parents having choice and their kids being educated or providing a quality education? I don't think we should be.
More populated communities seem to be, or at least the representatives of more populated areas seem to be more on board than less populated. Is that just a result of having fewer choices in more rural areas?
Well, no, I think that, rural areas, I mean, they do have fewer choices, but I think where most of the failing schools are in the big cities, the blue cities, to be honest with you. But I think as you're sitting here and you're looking at this, there's also the conversation out there from some on our side of the aisle that says, oh, we need to treat private schools like public schools and have all the same restrictions and regulations. And what I've been working with the governor is, and what we've been working with superintendents and school boards, I want to do the opposite. If you're a high performing school, why are we treating you the same as Davidson County and Shelby County, which are low performing? And let's treat you more like a private school. Let's uncuff you. Let's reduce the restrictions. Let's give you the autonomy and the freedom to provide that education to a higher level.
More competition,
but give you the ability to act more like a private school. Why are we holding you to the same standard as a Shelby County, who's awful in our state, who's the lowest performing school district, if you're Williamson County? It does not make sense. We need to reverse that process.
There are several that want to know where exactly the scholarship money comes from, and help us understand how the money flows within education.
Right. So, look, if we didn't have Republican majorities and Republican administration over the last 13 years, the Democrats would have spent every single dime that came in the state, so there would be no money. What we have done is spent money wisely. We still have billions of dollars in recurring that we haven't spent, that we spend on one-time money. So we can take $150 million or $240 million and put it in the scholarship fund that's outside of the K through 12 education system and set it up for parents to use to go send their kids to a private school that's a Christian school, that's a whatever school that they want to. Look, at the end of the day, the parents, what we learned from COVID, and I think this all happened post-COVID, you see more people wanting to have the ability to control their child's education. And so as you go through this post-COVID, parents are like, based on what happened during COVID, I want to have the ability, if I can't afford it, to take my kid and put him somewhere else that's better fit for him. It's your money. And so for people to say you shouldn't do that when it's your taxpayers' dollars goes against everything that I think that we should be doing to allowing parents to make the decisions that's best for them and their family.
So the Democrats in the halls of the General Assembly are suggesting already, before seeing legislation, frankly, that this takes money out of school systems. Is that true?
No, what it does, the money does not follow the student, and so the money would be outside of that. Now, currently, if your child moves from public school to private school, that money's leaving anyway, but it's not a direct follow.
No, because I mean, a lot of the state funding is based on how many pupils are in the system, right? So, I think what they're using is a natural dynamic of the system against the legislation, because naturally, if I have a public school system and I lose, for whatever reason, 1,000 children, well, I'm not going to get as much state dollars as I did the previous year with 1,000 less kids to teach.
That's right. Well, let me ask you, why did you lose 1,000 kids? So if you're meeting the parents' expectations for academics, they're less likely to pay for a private education unless they just want something different for their child, right? Academically, you're not pulling someone out to go pay for a private education. If they're Maryville City schools are a prime example. Williamson County schools are a perfect example. But let me tell you, people also say, you need to invest that money in K through 12 education. In 13 years under Republican control, we've invested or increased the amount of state appropriation from $3.4 billion to $7 billion. $3.6 billion increase. We have increased education spending. We have gone from 48th to 34th in the country in K through 12 attainment. Right? The previous 13 years under Democrat majorities, they only invested $1.4 billion. So we have invested in public education and we'll continue to invest. But at the same time, you can still invest in public education and give the parents the ability that makes the best decision for their child. You
know what I think you should do? I mean, this will go, obviously to the education committee, right? When it's debated. Maybe encourage, who's the chair of the education committee?
We have two. So one, Representative Moody and then Representative White.
Okay. So I think you should encourage one of those two representatives to call Senator Heidi Campbell over. If we want to learn why parents choose private education over public education, then have Senator Heidi Campbell testify as to why she sends her kid to private school. I'm not knocking her. I've asked the question of her repeatedly on social media and other platforms because I genuinely want an answer. I think if we can glean why she made that decision in her family, I think we can better understand, because she has an intimate knowledge of how public funds are spent in public education, probably more so than 95% of the population. So if we get to the bottom of why she made that decision, maybe we can better understand.
Well, I mean, why should we only allow people who can afford to send their kids to private school to do that when it's their taxpayer dollars that they're spending with the state of Tennessee? Why not give them the opportunity to make that decision for themselves?
So once again, just to answer some of the questions that are coming in. So the scholarship money, which is roughly $7,000 per student, thereabouts,
for what's being talked about.
Right. So the basics of the proposal, as we understand it, I understand it. I mean, it's got to be presented. It's got to be debated. It's got to be amended. Roughly 20,000 students, the first 10,000 needs-based, and then open it up for everyone else. Roughly $7,000 of scholarship. Specifically, that's money that we already have separate and apart from our education budget?
That's right.
So no money is going to come out of the education budget to go into the scholarship budget?
That's right. That's right.
I want to say that again. No money is coming out of the education budget to go into the scholarship fund?
Correct.
Okay, because it's the biggest question I get on this matter. And it's the biggest talking point the Democrats use, that you're taking money from education to spend on families that don't need it for private school or Christian schools or whatever.
But here's their theory once again. They're trying to tell the parents what they need and don't need for their child.
Right.
That's what the Democrats want to do. Democrats want to tell you, you need to go get your kid vaccinated. You got to put a mask on your kid for COVID. You can't be in school. You're going to have to do remote learning, which we saw what happened to all the attainment levels. All their decisions are based off control, not empowering. We want to empower the parents to be in charge, not only of their child's health care, which is what we did in COVID, but also of their child's education. If that school is performing, they're going to keep them there. If they're not performing, give them the opportunity to go somewhere else.
All right, Belle Kay and I promised that we would do this while you were here today, and I wanted to give you ample opportunity because I know this is going to take a while.
Okay.
I want you to list, because I've heard from our friends on the left.
Okay.
And I want you to list here today, Cameron Sexton, all the books that have been banned by the state of Tennessee. I want you to list them all right now, Cameron.
Yeah, there's none that's been by the state. Now, there might have been some by the school boards.
That's another. Well, they deem books that are age inappropriate, right?
Right. Well,
which is perfectly.
Look, at the end of the day, what we set up is a process for parents to be heard. I mean, once again, the Democrats are afraid for people to voice their opinion and what they believe. You saw it in COVID. You see it with books. You see it with other things. Challenging the health care, like, why are you telling me I have to go get vaccinated? Why are you telling me I have to wear a mask? The Democrats want to control every bit of your life.
If I can walk into a bookstore or go online and buy it, that book has not been banned.
Correct. I would say even if you can buy it online, even if it wasn't available in school, you could still buy it online and give it to your child.
Well, and that's the point, is that from the beginning of public education, we have determined age appropriateness with regard to reading materials.
That's correct.
And nothing else is going on other than that.
Correct.
Yet the Democrats, the Joneses of the world, want to claim that we are quote unquote banning, but it's just infuriating me because words mean things, and they're misrepresenting the people of Tennessee. CBI.
I've never heard anybody from the left misrepresent anything.
You're an authoritarian, you know that, right? All right, I promised some of the questions that are coming in from the super text line, and one of them was about, I lost it there, Bell, the motorcycle helmet laws. Oh, yeah, here it is. Please ask the speaker, what happened to the motorcycle helmet bill? It passed second reading 2 years ago. It's not been moved forward. Do they think it'll come up for a third vote so it can go to the governor's desk?
Yeah, so I had that bill when we were back in the old legislative plaza. I carried it to a helmet law, and so I'm okay with removing the restriction of helmets for motorcycle riders if that's the direction we want to go. I would have to check with the sponsors, see why they didn't bring the bill forward, but I'm assuming they're trying to work to get votes in the committee and so forth. But I'm for removing the helmets on motorcycles.
And is there any? I don't know the construct of the law. Any discussion about making sure that the taxpayers aren't on the hook?
Well, so when I was proposing the bill, I try to work and you try to put in certain types of riders on your insurance plan that would cover medical costs and so forth like that. And so there are parameters that you could do to make that the case. Because
you know me, I mean, I'm the libertarian with a small L, right? I believe in personal choice and personal responsibility. I just don't want the taxpayers to be on the hook on the other side of it.
But yeah, and so on your insurance policy, you could put a rider on there about a healthcare rider that would help control some of those costs.
Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, I know you can't voice this. Talking about the Memphis issues. Is there a way to get more money into public safety and police officers and law enforcement above and beyond is there a way to do that above and beyond making rules that would affect the district attorney? Oh,
yeah, absolutely. So we have done that. And so we've put, I think we've increased the number of state troopers by about 100 in West Tennessee, which has been very beneficial. We have invested, we've done targeted grant funding. And so we looked at where violent crimes happening by zip code, by street level, and we're investing more targeted than what we had been doing across the state. Government a lot of times just likes to give money out to everybody. And so what we try to do is say, okay, where's the crime happening? What resources do law enforcement need? Let's give them grants for those high crime areas. Because if you take a murder off the street, there's not someone behind them trying to murder somebody. And so that makes your community more safe.
Several folks trampolining off of our discussion about education and the scholarship fund are suggesting, hey, 7K doesn't cover a lot of private schools. Correct. And I'm sure that you've had this question asked of you. How do you respond to it?
Look, we're willing to move it. Look, this is just it's a fluid conversation. And so I think the one thing that the governor has done very well is put forth an idea and said, but this is not in concrete. Let's have the conversation. Let's be fluid. I think the average cost of a private education in Tennessee is $11,000. Well, I'm not opposed to raising it to $11,000. Let's have the conversation. One of the reporters was asking me, well, the Democrats said, well, $7,000 doesn't cover the cost of private tuition. Well, tell me what they'd be willing to support. Ask them that question.
It's always about money for the Democrats.
But the thing is they're not going to give you an answer because they're never going to support it. And so they're going to say they're against something because of $7,000, but they wouldn't be for it if it was $11,000.
Well, it's like when I do have an opportunity to talk to an individual left of center and they suggest that money's the problem, I ask them the question. It's a basic question that tell me how much we need to spend per pupil where you can promise me that grades will go up. Right. Just tell me how much is enough. And they never can. Because it's never enough.
Well, let me tell you, since I've been on the school choice with Governor Trump around, we've talked to a lot of directors of schools. Let me tell you what the third grade retention bill did in all these schools. It made them reevaluate the grading system. Mm-hmm. Because what you had is you had students who were making A's and B's, and the parents were like, oh, my son is an A or B student. How are they not proficient in reading? And so the school system started looking at it, and the ones who are affecting change are the ones who are saying our grading system was not mirroring what we were actually trying to test. And so you're going to come back and have a change on that.
This is a great question, and I know we've got to go after this one, Bell, but on the education front, the question was asked by Jason, have they given up on foregoing the federal education dollars? And I would say this, is the choice bill a first priority, and will we see consideration of the federal bill?
Yeah, there is, because there's more work to be done on federal. What we found out, and there should be a letter released sometime today or tomorrow from the study committee, is we're going to look at all the all the testing that's required and look at what that is and how redundant it is. We're going to look at the rules that they're enforcing the state to impose, looking like it's state rules and not federal rules. We're going to go back and take a whole look. Look, at the end of the day, our goal is to be free of federal money in our state, especially for education and everything else that we can afford. The last thing you want to do is be beholden to the federal government. And so what we also know, I mentioned this this weekend on Pat Nolan, which was Biden administration through Title IX, which says and there's a lot of great things in Title IX. I'm not saying there's not, but they're trying to put that you have to allow men to play women's sports in Title IX. And simply because you take education dollars from the federal government, you have to allow that to happen, even though we passed a law in the state of Tennessee that says that we don't allow that. And so those are the mechanisms they're using. So at some point, at what point do we push back and say our philosophy is different? And the second point is they're $34 trillion in debt. In 20 years, their interest payment is going to be $1.5 trillion. At some point, when are they going to withhold the money coming to the states and say we can no longer do it?
Tennessee should absolutely lead the nation on this front.
I agree.
Because of the national debt, because of that last point that you just made, because it is an unsustainable situation. Until a state says no, the federal government will continue to print money because they get control.
No, they get control, and that's how they hold it to you. But at the same point, it's not our money that's coming back to us anymore. It's debt. Our money's long gone. I mean, when you're $1.5 trillion in debt or deficit in 1 year, that's no longer your money coming to you.
Final question. What scares the speaker more, another Biden term or bears? There's an actual question from Dale. I'm not making this up. Dale wants to know what scares you more, bears, and I would love it if he was more specific, brown, grizzly, whatever. But what scares you more, Biden or bears?
Oh, Biden, by far, yeah.
What do you expect out of that? Get you out of the state for a minute. And talk about
I don't think he's going to win the election. I think the Democrats are going to try to do a coup at convention or something. You
think they'll try to get another candidate?
Oh, absolutely. I think they will. And if it was between Gavin Newsom and the bear, that's Gavin Newsom is very scary. He looks good, but he's a lot more scarier than Biden. But
I don't think he thought this through. I'm pretty sure I could take Biden with one hand behind my back.
Well,
I couldn't take the bear.
Yeah, I thought about this. It's not like we're running from. If we're running from the bear, then I'm not worried because I can outrun Joe Biden. And I don't have to outrun the bear, right? You don't have to.
Yeah, but the way I look at it is the bear is one thing. Biden represents 1,000 different things that he can affect me by, right? And so I can't fight everything that Biden's wanting to do to me, but I can fight back against the bear.
Cameron, thank you in all seriousness. Great, informative discussion. Let's have plenty of these during the General Assembly. I know that you often don't have time to come over, but we appreciate you stopping by.
Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Did not.